Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. In today's video we're going to be taking a look at Collision 2023. It's a super major happening this weekend and it has the final summit spot for the final summit in Smash Ultimate. There's a lot on the line here. Our top 16 seeding is Jackal, Zomba, Shattuck, and Siski in 13th. Riddles, Apollo, Kage, Meister, and Salt 1 in 9th, Dabuz and Cosmos in 7th, Kurama and Sonics in 5th, Light in 4th, Tweak in 3rd, Spargo in 2nd, and Leo in 1st. We'll go over the top 16 and who I think is going to get that summit spot, but before we do that, I want to go over a couple players that I think could have some breakout runs. Now, our first player is going to be Esam, and Esam's a bit of a tough one to seed because we know he's that top-tier caliber player. He's won majors over the best of the best before, but his performances as of late haven't been great, so he's seeded a little bit lower. Again, I don't think it's unjust. It just makes him have a very good bracket here because this is a Pikachu bracket if I have ever seen it. His first matchup is against Matador, which he should be able to beat. Then he goes against Quandale Dingle-Lingleton, who he is seeded to lose to, but he has beat in the past, as well as I think Esam being very good versus Steve. And then he goes against Light. Now, that is great for Esam. That is one of his better matchups. At least Light, that is one of his worst matchups because it's like, I think the only thing that could be worse is like maybe Big D. I honestly think Light would rather face MK Leo just because Pikachu is such a tough matchup for Fox. It's a really, really hard one. Though Light has overcome it in the past, nothing is free, especially when you're playing against Light. I would, on paper, probably favor Esam for this one. And it's the same thing on the next side of the bracket. He goes against Zomba. Esam versus a Rob player is very, very good for him. It could also be Jake, but then again, same thing. He's very good versus Steve. This bracket is amazing for Esam, and then we get into the top 16. At that point, we don't really care as much, but this is a very, very good chance for Esam to get top 16 through the winner's side. Now, his loser's side bracket is pretty rough. He is going against Double Ness, which is pretty unfortunate. One of them being Syrup as well. PK Chris has some crazy tech. So I think if he wants to do a run, his best chances is through the winner's side of the bracket. I'm curious to see if we see the Brawler really at all, because again, these are some very good Pikachu matchups, though that doesn't mean the Brawler doesn't come out because he likes to counter pick it with the stage sometime. A little bit of a tempo change. I'm very curious to see how Esam will do, but I think this bracket is really good for him on paper, though it's not going to be free. The next player that I want to talk about is going to be whoever wins this Mega Man Ditto of MPG and Peanut, because they are both absolutely incredible Mega Man players that I think could make the same level of runs here because they are absolutely insane. Now, they are going to go into Sonics right away in the winner's side of the bracket, which is very, very tough, but let's say they are able to beat Sonic somehow. Like, of course they can do it. They are those caliber players, but like Sonic is like a top 6, top 5 player in the world. It is very, very difficult to beat him, but let's say they pull it off. Then they would go into either Apollo, Kage, or Kronos. Again, very curious to see who wins that Ditto. And that's a pretty good matchup for Mega Man, but even if they drop into losers, they're going to be going against one of these Snake players. Again, that's a very good matchup for Mega Man. So I think that there's a chance that either Peanut or MPG, whichever one of them wins the Ditto, does overperform their seed. And then if you look on the other side of the bracket where the other one would go, you'd have ZD, Orion, Anathema into Zomba. Now, Orion is a bit of a tough opponent, ZD as well. I think if you can beat Orion, though, you have a decent chance versus the Rob players, and you have 2 Robs in a row, which is another way to tilt your bracket luck into your favor. So I think either Mega Man players could make some big runs here. There's going to have to be a couple upsets along the way. I think the hardest one is definitely going to be Sonics, which is like, you know, no duh, beating the top 6 players is going to be pretty difficult, but not impossible for these guys. They are absolutely insane. Before we move on to the other side of the bracket, a couple upsets that could happen right before we get into top 16. I think Cosmos Riddles is probably the most ambiguous one in the winner's side of the bracket, just because I don't think these guys have ever played before, at least not with their current characters, so this is very interesting. I have no idea how that's going to turn out. Leo Jackal, it's probably Leo, but then again, Jackal's one of those players that sometimes he's playing hot, so maybe he takes that. Light Zomba, Zomba has taken it in the past, but when they played it, Let's Make Big Moves, Light was pretty dominant in that set. Sonic's Apollo Kage, I mean, Apollo Kage, he almost always gets his upset win. I don't know if it happens here versus Sonics, but it's definitely not impossible. Then in loser side, you have either Cosmos or Riddles versus Kronos. Now, Kronos has been very impressive as of late. He's been making massive moves, so this could be another top player that he adds to his list. I wouldn't honestly be super surprised, though it's going to be a pretty tough opponent because Riddles and Cosmos are both unreal. Jackal and Jake, I do imagine Jackal takes that just because I'm pretty sure he would have a decent amount of experience versus Quandale, so I'd probably favor him in this one. Apollo Kage and Goblin, probably favor Apollo Kage. He's just very, very good. Then you have Zomba and Anathema, and I'm going to favor Anathema for that just because that man is a demon at the Rob Ditto. It is actually unreal how good he is at that. So going to favor Anathema. The only real upsets I have rejected, I guess, are Anathema over Zomba and then Riddles over Cosmos. But again, this is seeded very, very well, and the opponents are so close that it's pretty hard to tell. Now, the first player that we're going to talk about is going to be Quid, the GOAT himself, and this isn't going to be as analytical as they normally are. I'm not picking him because of certain matchups. I just think Quid can beat literally anyone. even though he has to fight Siski on his round 1, at least of this part of the bracket, which is very, very tough. And then he has to fight Tweak, which is very, very tough. I think that he can do it. Same thing with Ling, Chag, Shattuck in the loser side. I think every single opponent that you put Quid against, he is able to come out on top. It's not going to be easy for him. He did have a little bit of a rough Let's Make Big Moves, but I think Quid is such an amazing player. He has so much potential. He's cracked out of his mind the best PT out there, and I really think that he can make some massive upsets this tournament. The next player that we're going to talk about is someone that we always talk about when we see them in a bracket, because it's just such a rarity at this point, and they're so good, and that is going to be Shiny Mark. Now, he has a very good chance versus Lima just because that is Pikachu Bayonetta, but let's say he loses versus Lima, which again, he probably won't just because that matchup is horrendous, but Lima's also crazy, so there's a chance. He goes against Yoshio, who's very good, but he should be able to beat. Then he goes against Henry Ulma. He should be able to beat that. And then the matchups for him are Golden Jed, that's Palutena, he should win. MK Big Boss, that is Rob, he should win. Siski, that is Samus, which is not as easy for Pikachu, but also Shiny Mark is really good versus Samus for like no reason, so he has a chance to get into the top 16 through the loser side. Let's say he does beat Lima though, then he goes into Kurama, which is a little bit tricky just because that is Mario, though I do think he can do that. Same thing with Salt 1, even though like Mario's definitely a worse matchup than Roy, just because that's like one of Pika's like few even, maybe losing matchups. If you're super pessimistic, I still think it's even, but that is one of your tougher draws. But let's say he does lose to Kurama, then he goes against Andre Sefen. I think he should be able to win that. Then he goes against Ned. That is Sephiroth or PT. Sephiroth, Pikachu should destroy PT. I'm not actually super sure, but I would probably favor Pika. Then he goes into Meister, which is just a really, really tough draw. Like, we honestly might see the pick come out at that point, because that matchup is very, very bad. But if he does beat Kurama, he goes into Salt 1, which I think is definitely, again, it is doable. All these matchups are doable for him. The only ones I'd be a little bit worried for are Meister and Kurama, just because the matchups are in his favor on paper. I think his loser side bracket is really good. I think his winner side bracket is pretty good. The only thing where it's getting a little bit antsy is, again, if he beats Lima and then loses to Kurama, and then Meister happens to lose to Dabuz, which might not even happen. So those are a lot of variables, but I think Shiny Mark has a lot of different possibilities where he could make a run. Now, some upsets that could happen right before top 16. We have Spargo versus Shattuck. Probably going to be in Spargo's favor, but also Shattuck has been making moves lately, so maybe he gets that upset. He got one over Onan. Why not Spargo? Dabuz versus Meister. Dabuz is heavily favored here. Now, Meister has done it once. He did it at Frostbite. Maybe he does it again here, but Meister, on paper, is going to lose this one to Dabuz. Tweak versus Siski. Now, this one's a bit interesting because Siski did win the last time they played at LSI. I would say Tweak has leveled up massively since then. He has been doing way, way better, way more consistently, so probably would favor him there, though I think Siski has a decent shot out of all the upsets that could happen. I think Siski's probably the best chance, as well as just, I haven't seen Siski in a while. I don't know what he's been cooking. He might be doing some crazy stuff that I've never seen in my life. I wouldn't be super surprised because he's absolutely unreal. Then you have Kurama versus Salt 1. It's been going Kurama's way the last couple times they played, so I imagine it does here, but they've been very close sets, so maybe Salt 1 pulls it out this time. Ned versus Meister. I would probably favor Meister for this one, even though I feel like Sephiroth should do okay versus Game & Watch. You know, Meister is very, very good at the matchup. He's beaten Tweak Sephiroth before. I think it was at MomoCon, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would probably favor Meister here. Shattuck and Quid, I'm not even going to guess because I can't decide. I want to bet Quid, but it's really hard to bet against Shattuck, so we're just not going to guess at all. Salt 1 versus Dark Wizzy. Probably Salt 1 here. I think the match was very, very good for him. But Dark Wizzy is a super big hidden boss in this bracket. He could beat a lot of these very top players, including Salt 1. So not impossible for that upset to happen. Siski versus MK Big Boss. Again, haven't really seen Siski in a while, so I don't know what he's cooking. Though I would favor him here. Again, a lot of these picks have been bland in this video, but the matchups, at least for the top 16 side, seem pretty good for a lot of players. I think if we're going to see an upset, it is probably Tweak over Siski, just because maybe Siski is very good at the Diddy matchup, but I'm not super sure. Now on to the Summit spot. Now, these are all the players in the top 16 that aren't in Summit, and you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 players in top 16 not in Summit, and they are all hungering for it. A couple of them are projected to make it through the winner side, a couple through losers. Maybe we have some added players here that aren't even on here. Like, again, players we talked about. Quid could definitely make it in here. Esam can make it in here. Dark Wizzy. There's a lot of very scary players that could make it into this part, but let's say we're only talking about these core. I think the people that have the best shot are Riddles, Sonics, and Cosmos, just from recent performances. But I think Dabuz is someone you can't get out. Meister as well. We haven't seen a ton of Meister recently, so maybe he's been cooking something up. Same thing with Siski. Salt 1's been getting his consistency back. Shattuck has been having these really high highs. Zomba and Jackal are just incredibly consistent players. Anyone could take it. If I had to pick just one, probably would be Sonics again, just because he has been tearing it up as of late. But any of these players are serious contenders. I'm really excited to see how it goes, and it's going to make this tournament incredibly intense. But now on to the top 16. Now we have the lovely Google Sheets here by ICOOKIEMONTERZ. Their stuff will always be in the description when we do these top 16s, but this is just the projected seeds here, just so we can talk about all the players in the top 16. Starting with losers round 1, our first matchup is going to be Riddles versus Jackal. Now I will favor Riddles here, but again, we talked about Jackal. He has that dog in him sometimes. When he is going off, he goes off, so he definitely can pull that upset. Though I would probably favor Riddles. Now Zomba Polokage. This one's interesting because Zomba has been having a bit of a raw problem. He's lost to MVD, he's lost to Kronos, but he doesn't have an Apollo Kage problem because from what I know, unless they play it again, he's up like 5-0 or something against Apollo Kage. It's actually insane, so I would probably favor Zomba here, though Apollo Kage's adaptation is very strong and he can make that comeback. I think I will say that Zomba wins it. Now Shattuck Meister, I'm going to say Shattuck wins that just because Korra and Game Watch feels like a really rough matchup for Game Watch. I don't know how he's supposed to get in against that massive sword. That up air seems like a nightmare for Game Watch, even with Ki. So I think that Shattuck does have a chance there. Siski versus Salt 1. I don't know who's going to win this one. I have no idea, but it is going to be a slobber knocker. That's going to be an absolute banger of a match. I think I'm going to pick Salt 1 for this one, though. But again, Siski, I haven't seen him in a while. I wouldn't be surprised if he had some stuff that was impressing me or he was just playing out of his mind. So those are my predictions for the 13th place finishers. Now, in the winner's side of bracket, this one is a lot of matchups that we've seen before that are pretty one-sided. You have MK Leo Cosmos, that's recently been very Leo-sided. Light Sonics, it's recently been very light-sided. Spargo Devuz, pretty Spargo-sided, and then Tweak Kurama. This is one that I don't think we've ever seen before, but Tweak doesn't strike me as a player to lose to Mario. And what that means is there are certain ways that you can play around Mario, and Tweak is someone that I feel like absolutely would eat that up, though Kurama has been someone that has endlessly impressed me over and over again, so maybe he pulls that upset off. Again, out of any of the upsets to happen in the winner's side, it would probably be this one to be the biggest, just because of how convincing the other three have looked in their respective matchups, though nothing is impossible and everything is doable. Like, Devuz has come close, Sonic has come close, Cosmos has come close. I would probably predict this is how the winners is going to go. Now, our first loser's 9th match is Kurama versus Riddles. Now, this one's pretty interesting, because I think if Riddles goes Kazuya, he should lose, because it's kind of the same archetype. If they're both hitting you once and they're killing you, because Kurama's combos are that clean. Plus, Kurama's movement is just way, way better because Mario's mobility is way better than Kazuya's, plus Kurama is a crazy man. Then I think it's probably Kurama. Now, if it's Terry Mario, I have no idea. I have literally no clue, but I'm going to guess that Kurama wins this one, though I do think Riddles will probably be playing pretty hot this tournament, and honestly, again, I wouldn't be shocked if Riddles didn't even start in the loser side of bracket, so he wouldn't have to play against Kurama, but I'm going to predict for Kurama for this one. Dabuz versus Zomba. Now, Dabuz, very normally, he wins this one. He wins this one most of the time, though Zomba has done it in the past. I would favor him here. Sonics versus Shattuck. It's really hard to bet against Sonics. Even though I did in the winner's side, there's like 3 players in the world that are like consistently beating Sonics. Maybe Shattuck can do it, but probably going to be Sonics for that one. Cosmos Salt 1. This is also one that's tough to predict. Not because they don't have any information, though, because they have a ton of information. Every single set that they play is a banger. It is so close, but I believe Cosmos won the last one, so that means he's bound to win 2 in a row, so I will be guessing Cosmos for that. Now, for loser 7th, we have Kurama versus Dabuz, and Dabuz doesn't lose to Mario. He just doesn't do that. It's not a thing that he does. He doesn't know how. Maybe Kurama impresses me. I think that would be the most impressive upset in the event by far if Kurama is able to pull this one off. Also, Dabuz has beaten Kurama a lot in the past. I think Dabuz is probably going to win that one, but hey, Kurama's really, very good. Maybe he manages to do it, but Dabuz, he doesn't lose to no Mario. Then you have Sonics versus Cosmos. Now, this one is a bit tricky, because I think on paper it should be Cosmos, because Aegis is really, really good versus Sonic. One of the few characters in the game that could be regarded as a winning matchup for Sonic, or rather for Aegis. You know what I mean. Sonic loses the matchup, which usually does not happen, though I am still going to favor Sonic just because Sonic is absolutely crazy. I could see Cosmos winning this one, and in my mind, this is kind of like an LCQ spot qualifier, because Dabuz is probably going to lose the next round, spoilers, because he has to go against either Leo or Light, which are like 2 of his worst matchups, and I am going to predict Leo for this one just because, you know, keep it simple, keep it stupid. I do think Leo wins that, though Light has done it in the past, and he was very close at Genesis. That's going to be a banger set, whichever way it does go, but I'm going to guess Light. Spargo Tweak, I'm going to guess Tweak again. I really think Tweak has that dog in him. I think Genesis was a bit of a rough tournament for him, even though they both got like 7th and 5th respectively. It wasn't even rough. He got top 8 at like one of the biggest majors ever, but you know what I mean. I think Tweak will be winning that one, so we have another Leo Tweak Grand Finals, or Winners Finals, which is always nice. Then you have Light versus Dabuz in the loser side of bracket. Already talked about that. Light is very, very dominant in that matchup typically. And then you would have, it should be Spargo here. Spargo versus Sonics. Now, Sonics did win the last time that they played, and he beat the Aegis as well, which is really scary. Now, I think that Spargo will have been grinding that because he doesn't want to lose that again. Aegis should have been like, I think the Aegis was probably like, oh, this is in the pocket. This is just kind of my free win because I'm really good at the matchup. I've done it a lot before, and Aegis does pretty well versus Sonics, but he clearly put in the work. I think Sparkle probably has grinded back. Maybe it's with the Cloud, maybe it's with the Aegis, maybe Sonics just rocks him again anyway, but I do think that Sparkle will be able to take it this time. But you may have noticed, both 5th place finishers are LCQ players. Debuzz and Sonics, those are our highest players that are LCQ. They're going to have to fight it out, and I do think that Debuzz is favored in that one. I also think Debuzz's bracket is more favored for him. I think Kurama's a way better matchup than Cosmos is, though it could be Riddles as well, and it could be Salt One, which are two very different stories. So Riddles is not a great draw for Debuzz because Riddles does usually win that, though Debuzz has won in the past. But just something to note that is pretty interesting that our 5th place finishers are going to be fighting for the summit spot, at least in my bracket. But now we have our top 4, Leo versus Tweak. Now Tweak usually beats Leo. He's beaten them the last couple times they played, and Leo is back in his full form. He's been playing very, very well as of late, but so has Tweak. The matchup is in Tweak's favor. I'm curious to see, is it Joker? Is it Byleth? Is it Corrin? I'm not even kidding. There's a chance it could be Corrin because I think the character does, out of all of Leo's characters, the best versus Diddy. So excited to see what that is, though on paper it's probably going to be Tweak. Light versus Spargo. This one is also very, very tough to call, and Light did win it the last time, so I'm going to say Spargo wins it this time, because usually I say the player that won it last time, you know, they are guaranteed to win it the second time. Nope, it's going back and forth between these guys. I'm going to say Spargo gets it. Now Leo, Spargo, these guys haven't played, I think, since Spargo went on break, so this is going to be a super, super hype set. I'm going to say that Leo wins it. I also don't think we've seen him play Joker versus Spargo since Ultimate Summit 3, which is crazy that it's been that long. So that's going to be a super hype set. But then the grand finals, you do have Tweak Leo. And again, I think that Tweak will be able to take the one. Though, do you know what? I will say that Leo does reset the bracket because he is still MK Leo. But Tweak ends up getting the win. And I thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I'm curious to see what your guys' bracket are like. If there's any players that I didn't talk about, please let me know down below, because there's a lot of people I didn't mention in this video because it's a super major. There's 30 million amazing top players here. Really curious what you guys think. What do you have for your bracket? Who do you got at Summit? Who do you want at Summit? Sport's been absolutely unreal lately. Thank you guys for everything, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.